And to the new G's that carry on the legacy, show respect to the OGs, cause that's your history. The Sonny Carson, Bunchy Carters and Slausons, revolutionaries but G'd in proportion. From the seed to the coffin, putting in work, paying dues for the cause, staying true to the law.
So if you could just tell me what your event is about today.
Okay. Basically the event is, it's a extension of It Takes a Village to Raise a Child, and it's about the elderly and the youth reconnecting, bridging the gap between those two parts of our community, and to discuss their differences and bring some solutions to the table as to how they can be more in communication with each other to help fix, some of the issues in our neighborhood.
And what are some of the issues that you feel that we're having in the Black community which is keeping us separated?
I think the biggest thing that's keeping our community separated is economics, which has a lot of a trickle-down effect. If there's no jobs, there's more violence, there's more drug sales. Children try to find something more that they can belong to because they feel abandoned because of their parents being out working all the time and not being able to take care of them or give them the attention that they need. Teen pregnancy is another one. Education, or the lack of education, is another one. There's so many things that's really diluting our community that I could go on forever about that.
And as a parent, can you tell me what is it that a parent can do so that we can start building our community up as a nation? What can a parent do?
I think, me personally, paying more attention and being more involved in being a parent, paying more attention to the kids, you know what I mean, and their needs, their fears, the things that they like, and being a parent on a more professional level, if you understand what I mean.
And you also mentioned about the elderly and the youth coming together and to bridge that gap. Can you give me a little bit more information about what road would we travel to get there? How would we go about it?
That's one of the reasons why we're doing the event today, just to get both parties actually talking to each other, and maybe through the communication some solutions can come about as to how they can start to reconnect. I think really one of the solutions is, to learn how to love each other again, you know what I'm saying? Like, a lot of the elderly are afraid of the youth, you know what I mean? And a lot of the youth don't respect the elderly for their various reasons. But at the bottom of it, at the end of the day, learning to love each other again is the biggest thing.
And can you give me just a definition about what love is, description?
Well, I'll give you my interpretation. To me, love is, really understanding each other to the highest degree. You know what I mean? Your likes, your dislikes, the background, where you plan to go in the future. And when I say understanding, I mean to really have clear comprehension of these individuals or groups and be able to, look at them as a part of your family instead of it just being, that's just somebody on the corner. You know what I mean? So I guess that's the best way I can answer that question. I think what I'm striving to get out of this is awareness, for both parties, so they know how each side feels. So when they leave, they have a broader understanding of the situations that's going on in the community. The panelists that we have are people from backgrounds, that involves ex-gang members that's from the city school district, single mothers, things like that. And it's so that, we come from various perspectives of the community. It's not just, from the gang members or from the drug dealers. It's from everybody. So that awareness is what I hope they'll leave here with. And we plan on having some literature that'll help show parents like the precursors to their children being involved in gang activity or dealing with drugs and stuff like that. So the overall goal is awareness of each other's differences. And this is just the beginning of, you know, a 3-part series for It Takes a Village, because this is the beginning part. We're going to have another part, and then to finalize it, we're going to bring everybody back together and have them talk about the issues again and see how much they've learned and progressed from those first 2 events. And after that, we'll be doing more events, you know, because you got to be consistent with it. You know what I mean? You can't just give it to them once or twice and then strive to leave them to figure it out on their own. You got to continue to feed the people with information and help to rebridge them together.
So once they come here, because when they come here and they get the information, it's one thing to come here and get it, and then when you leave and you go out the door, it's like you're faced with those same problems. So how do you expect the people to take this information and use it so that we can make a difference?
Again, it goes back to, you know, love. You know what I mean? I know that in our communities, you know, through various conversations, the elders always talk about how, you know, they wish the kids would do this and do that. So they have a sincere concern about their community, and the kids wish they could get more jobs and be involved in this. So they have that love for their community. They just don't know how to put it in focus and use it to the best of their ability. So what I hope the people get as a tool to use when they go back into their neighborhoods is different perspectives. You know what I mean? So when they ride down the street and they see some young brothers on the corner, they're not like, you know, look at these young whatever, and they can understand the dynamics behind them having to do that. And, sometimes the kids can see the elders and how they work so hard to bust their butt to provide for their family, which takes away from the time that they have for their family, and they can understand that and say, well, you know, maybe I should focus on getting a better education so I don't have to work that hard if I have kids and leave them to the streets to be raised. We're striving to make it more of a broader upstate New York kind of issue, because it's not just in Rochester, it's in pretty much any urban city in America. So we're striving to incorporate other cities in upstate New York. So the second event will be in Albany. The third event, we're striving to have it in Syracuse. I myself am representing Pure Talent Incorporated, which is my business, but it's also, I'm striving to get it to be a non-for-profit organization or an umbrella, because it's an incorporation, so it'll have different departments underneath it. And then my brother, he represents the Supreme Life Givers program. And, you know, that is more of a program, you know, directly dealing with troubled youth and saving the youth and being more involved in the youth's life. So those are the 2 entities that are hosting this event.
Supreme Life Givers in general is a youth organization we started about 3 years ago, and we've done different events for the community, clothing drives and food drives and things of that nature. And now our focus is more geared towards gang violence and you know, just youth violence and prevention in general. So we decided to come together to do this event because once again we see that the community is not understanding each other, and it's causing the youth to find different outlets that are not necessarily conducive to positive behavior and a positive you know, atmosphere for our community. Again, the gang issue is very important to me personally because I used to be a gang member, and in receiving knowledge of self and understanding my duty to the community, I decided to change my ways and to reconnect with the youth in the area to help them change their ways. So, you know, this part of the forum is specifically for the elders. We want to talk to them and the community specifically before they go out and deal with the actual youth. And the second part is dealing with the actual youth, so they can go out and learn how to deal with the elders. And, you know, our determined idea in general is just to basically develop more programs in the communities. Like he said, the upstate New York communities. That's our determined idea, to show people that, you know, the youth deserve to have more outlets, more positive programs, and that there are citizens in the community that are willing to work with them. So, you know, this event is going to be a very positive event. And like you said, it's just a stepping stone. So this is part one, and then hopefully if the community feels the need, then we can do bigger and better events. One of the questions that somebody had asked us is that, are gangs all negative? And my reply to them is that they're not all negative, because it's a different reality for the youth. You know, for the young person who basically, that's their culture, that's their lifestyle. They don't see it as negative, even though there is negative components and aspects to it. So in other words, it fills a void. Sometimes they come from broken homes, they don't have any family, they're just searching for that brotherhood. And that's, a lot of times, that's what gangs give them. It gives them that unity, it gives them that brotherhood. And to them, it's not all negative. Even if negative acts are committed while living that lifestyle, it's just basically part of the game. When I was gangbanging, it was family. It was really very rarely where we were out there doing negative things just to do negative things. Now, if problems came to us, or we got into certain dilemmas doing what we were doing, then, you know, we handled it. That's when the problems came to be. But all in all, it was just a family atmosphere. It was more about family. It was more about brotherhood. It was youth that were hopeless, that came from bad homes, that came from bad environments, that banded together to feel like they belonged, or feel like, you know, they had purpose. And, you know, that's what really the gangs give a lot of them. It's not negative to them, because that's their identity at the time, when they had no identity before. And, you know, it goes to show you that even though gangs per se took a turn for the worse, the original purpose is still apparent, even in their psyche.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, you know, like Bloods and the Crips, they came out of the dismantlement of the Black Panther Party.
Absolutely.
And, you know, when the party dismantled, it left a lot of youth with no one to look up to and no sense of belonging. What they did was they banded together and, you know, to quench the thirst of that need. And of course, you know, economics play a part in why it turned violent. You know, various factors. That's why, you know, brothers like us are so important, because we speak their language.
Exactly.
We relate to them. They see themselves in us. And we don't come from a perspective of you're wrong. We come from the angle of we've been there. We know what you're going through. But we also know that you have to change it up if you want to survive.
Yeah.
Right. And not only personally survive, but if you want your people to survive. And, you know, when I first, because, you know, I for all intended purposes, I'm an OG blood. And I left that lifestyle when I found the 5% Nation and I got knowledge of self. As you can see, I still wear this to basically remember all my brothers that's not with us anymore due to the lifestyle we were living. And, you know, it doesn't mean that I'm claiming colors, and it doesn't mean that I'm banging. Yeah, what it means is that I still remember the struggle that we went through. We were misguided. We were young. We didn't know that what we were doing was wrong. We just needed to belong and needed to stay together. And, you know, I think that if a lot of the older brothers, the OGs, and the older brothers that are still in these gangs would teach the original message that we were instated by, the original message of the Black Panther Party, the original message of the Young Lords, the original message of, you know, organizations that taught youth empowerment to the young gang members, that we can turn it around again.
Thank you, man.
Right. Like, you know, when I talk to the young Crips, for instance, because they know who I am and they know what gang I used to represent, but they also know that I'm for the people, they'll sit down and they'll talk to me about it. When I talk to them, I tell them, you know, Crips started as Community Revolution in Progress.
Absolutely.
And it was about the youth standing up to the oppression that they were feeling from society, that they were feeling from the police, that they were feeling from everybody at that time. So, you know, I think that if gangs are not all bad or all negative, they just have been led astray. So, you know, that's one of the things that I do when I work with the older gang members.
Okay.
Is I tell them, you have influence and you have, you know, you have power over these children to lead them in the right direction. So are you going to lead them in the right direction, or are you going to lead them in the wrong direction?
There's an apparent disconnect in the black community between youth and the elders of today that didn't exist in other time periods such as the 60s. Why do you think that is, and what changed?
There's so many factors that feed into that. We had a general breakdown, societal breakdown in terms of morals and values and so forth, but it impacted the black community even more so. And also it has to do with, at the height of the 1960s and 70s, which was one of the most progressive periods in the history of our people in terms of collective struggle and so forth. There were many things, and I'm not making it up, the historical record is clear. There were many things that were done intentionally by the government to help weaken that movement, including a massive infusion of illegal drugs and weapons into our community. That actually, I'm not making it up. You can go get a book called The FBI Files and read all about it. It was strategy. Most of you have probably heard of COINTELPRO, the counterintelligence program that the government launched in order to prevent what they call the rise of a messiah in terms of political organizing in our community and so forth. And no doubt they have people like Malcolm and Martin and Medgar Evers and so many others in mind. But that has happened also. Those who are in control in terms of the power elite in this nation understood the importance of actually allowing for the expansion of a black middle class. And guess who that was? Many of those were the people who were at that time the leadership in our community. So that was a calculated way of co-opting much of the leadership, separating those who had the skills and the knowledge and understanding, and who were actually in many cases in leadership positions at that time, who really, and I just keep it real as they say, sold our people down the drain. So, and that's just the beginning of what happened. That's a huge question. It's the kind of question that really requires serious historical analysis to understand fully. But though I just scratched the surface of a few things that happened.
As you said, it's, you know, issues surrounding the question are vast. You know, they encompass, you know, some of the issues you brought up regarding, you know, government, you know, intervention in the issue. Other issues, you know, psychological, you know. One of the things I wanted to touch on with regards to that is that what we're dealing with even now in present day is that what you have here is an attack on, you know, in the African American community, the urban community, what you have is an attack on the idea of organization. That's what you really have. Let's look at it. Let's look at, you know, the RICO laws being applied to gangs and street crew organizations. The crime is not selling drugs, violence, or any of these things. The crime is belonging to a criminal organization. And the success, like what happened in Chicago, like what happened in '95 in New York City, in the Bronx, like what happened in LA. The success, what law enforcement or what the suppression model called success, was the erosion of the organizational structure. They didn't care about the violence of the drugs. It was the erosion of the organizational structure, the ability to organize, you see. And this is where the suppression model bumps heads with the intervention model. See, in real intervention, we applaud organization. There's nothing wrong with organization, with people organizing. That's a great thing. We're supposed to do that. The problem is that we want to organize along pro-social lines and not anti-social lines. decentralize. We want to organize. You know, we want to hustle a different product. You know what I mean? And that's the thing. But that's one of the things I just want to touch on briefly is that what we really have is an attack on our people organizing. You know, that's the big fear. The big, J. Hoover spoke of in the report saying when he said, we want to prevent the rise of a black messiah that will unify and electrify the black community. That's what he's really talking about. He's like, we don't need organizational structure there. That's what we don't want. And then there's other issues as well. I mean, it's economics. While we need, speaking from the position of the powers that be, while we need doctors and lawyers and politicians, we also need unskilled laborers. We need people in the prisons. That's an issue. I mean, Corrections Corporations of America calls prisons credit facilities. That's the term they use for.
One of the things in which they did, when I say they, I'm talking about the power that be. And they separated already the male from the house systematically, leaving the female all alone. And in war, they would call that the prize booty or the spoils of war. So when the male was pushed out, and then the trick of integration, so to speak, kind of weakens also, no disrespect, but we needed to get ourselves together before we really integrated. We wasn't strong enough, and this is what Brother Hal Eagle, Brother Sharif was talking about, as far as keeping the leadership away, so that when the organization was striving to organize us through a black agenda in the 60s, they strived to do that, but it was definitely frustrated through the COINTELPRO. So when they systematically push the men out or destroy the man and created through the Constitution, the 13th Amendment, which states that the only way through the abolishment of slavery from 1865 through the Emancipation Proclamation, they said the only way that a person will, be a slave again is that he commits or she commits a crime. And this is what he was talking about, the criminality, or using criminal behavior to try to link us, and this is what we've been falling victim to. So, there's drugs in the community, pimps, hoes, and all that other type of stuff, murder, and all those type of things that go on in our community, but these are the things that, sort of like he was given the bottom of everything, So that's just my seat on it.
The fact of integration, basically what they did was, they made us struggle for so long, but also sold us a dream. And we chased that dream like a donkey chases a carrot. Basically, we wanted to have not better school systems for ourselves, but we wanted to integrate into their school systems. We didn't want better neighborhoods for ourselves. We wanted to live in their neighborhoods. We lost our sense of community when we started moving away from our communities. I mean, in the African American community in general, we had barbershops, we had meat markets, we had, our own schools, we had our own establishments, and without knowing it, we abandoned that to integrate into their establishments, into their society, even though we wasn't wanted, the fact that we wasn't wanted in there pushed us to try to get in there even more. But what we did in essence is that we left our community and we left our, sense of togetherness in order to do that. And then of course, like Sharif was saying, there's always been gangs, there's always been, groups of brothers that came together to protect the establishment, to protect that neighborhoods. When things started changing was when we were spread out so much, and the way we came back together, was not for the same need that we came together in the first place. Understand what I'm saying? So in other words, instead of protecting our neighborhoods, we wanted to protect ourselves. We wanted to capitalize off it because we didn't have anything. You know what I'm saying? We had more when we were quote-unquote oppressed in our community than we did when we were allowed to branch out. And that's when the disconnect really started. As I wasn't there, but as a student of that time period, that's what I feel was the most detrimental to our people was to stay together, and we didn't do that.
In Tulsa, Oklahoma, it was a place called Black Wall Street, and Black Wall Street was hospitals, general stores, barbershops, things like that. Banks, things like that. And that was a testament to how we stuck together and there was progression. And once we started to separate, we started being picked off one by one. Neighborhoods were starting to suffer from COINTEL agendas and things like that.
I think feminism plays a really strong part in kind of what has happened. And when people speak of feminism, they talk about it as if it's just this one thing where everybody's kind of got this common cause and then everybody's on the same page. And it's not that. It's very much not that. It's kind of like saying Islam is all one thing and not realizing that there are different, sects within Islam. And I think that black women brought into feminism, which was not a black feminism. For the white woman whose greatest oppression may have been, I want to get a job. I want to be able to, leave my house or earn my own money. You know what I mean? That was never our issue. So if you don't have the same issues, that word integrating, that can be used in a lot of different ways. You know what I mean? And to integrate into that movement when their common cause is not your common cause, it's going to result in a different effect. Right? So for us, buying into this, oh, let me burn my bra, you know what I mean? Like, it's way more serious for us. You know what I mean? So for us, it turned into, which goes back to slavery, where it's like, beat the man down, and then it's going to have two results. Either you're going to hate him for being weak, or you're going to try and protect him and not let him grow strong. Right? So when you bring that to modern day and you connect that with feminism, it's like it turned into more of a male bashing type of thing, you know what I mean? So now we don't feel like we need the black man. He's worthless, you know what I mean? You add into that the whole idea of the welfare queen and the welfare system coming into the home and saying, if you have a man living here, we're not gonna help you, you know what I mean? So it's a lot of pieces to that. And I think that is a huge part of it. Add to that, this idea of the bad bitch, where, you got now prostitution and selling your body and those kind of pieces added to it, and your value becomes how much money, this man you're connected with has. Lack of education, women being pushed through the system to get education and, still being paid less than a man, which causes a certain animosity, if you will, you know what I mean? There's a lot of pieces to it. The divorce rate, I know when I was younger, when I looked around the classroom, it was like the person whose parents was still married was the oddballs. You know what I mean? It's no longer the norm to want to get married. And be that if you get married through the government or you just have word as bond and, you acknowledge that this is my partner for life. People have a lack of commitment. And part of that is because when you dealt with that integration piece and moving out and trying to acclimate into their systems and become one with them, you lost yourself, you know what I'm saying? So when you begin to do that, in order to acclimate into those systems, it's a requirement that you buy into that American dream. And that American dream is based on dog eat dog. Right. So it's all about self, you know what I mean? So you can't operate within that system and hold those ideologies to be true and believe in a communal way of life. Like, they just do not coexist well.
The way in which we've been responding here on the panel is literally indicative of what's called in the military intelligence, silent weapons for quiet wars. You have this type of weapon is the type of weapon that when you're attacked with it, you don't have a point of reference as to what you're being attacked with, how you're being attacked, and so you have no way of intelligently responding to the attack to get adequate assistance. So, you know, we end up falling back on, well, the man did this and the system did that, and you know, and it becomes a nameless, faceless, tasteless thing that people who even want to help go look at you and say, this guy's crazy, or he's lazy, or he's shiftless, or he's, you know, even the most liberal-minded of people go, wow, they just can't take care of themselves. They're just in keep. You know what I mean? And so, but I think we all touched on it, and it's literally a war, or yeah, it's an attack on organizational principles in our community. It's an attack on the real American dream. I mean, if you want to talk about, you know, Brother mentioned, you know, earlier about other street crew organizations became Americanized, right? What happened with the Irish gangs? They legitimized. What happened with the Italians? Same thing. They legitimized. They became organized, and they went from the dark side to above ground. That's Americanization. That is the American dream. You see, we were sold something that we were sold a facsimile thereof. We thought what we thought was the American dream, but denied in one shape, form, or fashion the means. You know, what is the means? The means is the continuity of information from the older generation to the younger generation. If I can see a brother like this man, or this man right here, I can ask them. When they came up, it was the norm to be a homeowner. We look at people our age, right, and younger. That's not the norm. We don't even think about that. It was like that's homeowner. I must be rich to own a home. You know, but just a generation or two generations before, that was the norm. So you could see the disconnect, and you could see, you know, an elder like yourself or like yourself. You could probably, we can see the dismay on your face when you see us. Like, wow, what happened? You know, they're totally alien. They just look like us. You know what I mean? And the youth say the same thing about you, right? You know, there's a war on the principles of manhood, as the sister was just talking about. There's a war on, not a war on men, there's a war on the principles of manhood in our community. When you have articles and you have, you know, sociology reports that are talking about things like in 2011, 2012, redefining manhood, what does that mean? You know, to us that should be when 1 out of every 4 of us is unemployable, you know, under police supervision. That's frightening. When eligible men in our community are outnumbered by eligible women 5 to 1, those are wartime conditions in any other country or any other community.
And by the way, those wartime conditions are not coincidental. Those are calculated. That black women are progressing by leaps and bounds compared to black men in this nation is not a coincidence. That's calculated by people who control the economic and the political system. So we need to be clear about that. But listen, brother was mentioning the RICO laws, and he said, remember in Chicago, remember in New York. Do y'all remember in Rochester?
Yes, sir.
Do you remember in Rochester, Garson Avenue, Parcells, and some of the young brothers over there who was nickeling and diming it? They wasn't selling no big-time drugs. They charged them under the RICO laws. In fact, some of the people who were associated with them came to our organization at that time, armed, and we went to bat for some of them. What happened ultimately? They got the young brothers down at the jail to sell each other out. Some went to prison and some went free. Remember? And we went out to Penfield, to the prosecutor's $300,000 or $400,000 house and delivered him a letter, did we not? With our position on it, right? So I just wanted to prick our memory that this is not happening in a far-off land somewhere, but right here in Rochester.
We have seen an emergence of organized gangs on the East Coast, most prevalent being the Bloods and Crips of the West Coast. How did these gangs find their way to the East Coast, and why are they so attractive to the youth?
We all know they got their start on the West Coast in California. And you're right, I would say around 1992, 1993, you know, New York City and a lot of big cities on the East Coast started seeing Bloods and Crips and gangs that weren't the norm for that area. You know, we had always had either street crews or, you know, family organizations, but, you know, or even Latino gangs. But as far as the black gangs, the Bloods and the Crips and things of that nature, you know, things spread as people relocate, as most importantly when people enter the prison system. You know,
that's it.
the Blood started in 1993 in C-73 on Rikers Island. And it got started by brothers who were heavily influenced or had ties to the West Coast. A lot of these gangs start in the prison system and move on into society as people are released and people relocate, and you know, you have family members. It might be a family member that visits his cousin in California who's a Blood and ends up becoming a Blood and brings it back to the Bronx, and now the whole Bronx is Blood. You know, and when I was young, you know, I ended up on Rikers Island, and it was just Bloods, just everywhere. That was the thing to be. Now, my mentality was always, if I'm going to be part of something, I'm going to be part of the strongest thing. I mean, why be part of an organization? This is how my young mind thinks. Why be part of an organization that is the underdog? I'm going to be part of the ones that's running things. So everybody was Blood. Blood was the one thing that was running it. That's what I did. And then I tell myself, okay, now I'm here. But I'm not going to be nobody's soldier, because being a soldier is not as fun as being a captain.
That's right.
So I'm going to do whatever I need to do to prove to these brothers that I need to be at the top of the ranks. And that's what I did as well. And you're always going to find the elders or the older brothers that see your ambition and capitalize off of that. Well, this young brother will do anything. Let's make him put in work. And let's make him put in work. And before you know it, while they sitting back watching you, you're the only one putting in all that work. But then you're the only one risking your freedom. You go to jail for, you know, a 1 to 3, and you end up doing a 7 to 15. Not off of the things you did while you was in the street, but the things you did, you was in jail, either to survive, to prove yourself, or to, once again, belong. You know what I'm saying? Like, we have to be notorious. We have to be known, because we come from a place where, you know, inside of us, a place where nobody knows us. Nobody cares about us. No one understands us. You know what I'm saying? Like, no one understands me. No one understands the inner struggle that I go through. But these brothers do, because we all come from the same place. You know, we all come from the same mentality, and we banded together. It just so happens that, you know, like conditions that Howard had said about putting drugs in the community and guns in the community and things like that, you know, a lot of things that could have been an outlet for not necessarily positivity, but an outlet that wasn't as violent, turns out to be more violent by the people who say they're trying to cure it. Like Sharif was saying before, gangs are big business. Understand what I'm saying? Because if you're out there and you're selling drugs and you're committing acts, violent acts, you're going to end up in prison. And when you end up in prison, you're going to spread the word. You're going to recruit. But that's what they want. They say they don't want it, but they want it, because what you do when you're recruiting is you're keeping your gang alive. You're keeping the activity alive. When you do that, you're paying COs, families' tuitions, you're paying the warden of the jail, you're paying the police that arrest you. You pay these people's salary. Understand? If there wasn't no you in the sense that you are right now, it'd be no them. Like I was telling you outside, if we turn around, I was telling the brother, if we turn around and let's say young Crips turn it back to community revolution in progress, and now we not banging against each other no more. Now we banging against you. We the government's worst nightmare. And the government goes bankrupt.
But we fail to realize.
You understand what I'm saying? So, you know, how the initial question was how did it spread? And you know, it's another broad question, because you know it's here. It's spread and it's here. You know, now what are we gonna do to, you you know, to remedy the situation. Because I'm gonna tell you something, blood is always gonna be here. Crip is always gonna be here. You're not gonna dismantle it. You're not gonna just save all of them. So how do you change the mindset of these brothers from within? You know, how do you feed them the wrong foods and the right foods and lead them in the right direction instead of keeping on dishing out the wrong foods? Or letting them eat the wrong food. Because you don't necessarily have to serve the meal, but if you sit there and watch a brother eat a poisonous meal, you just as to blame as them.
We had gangs in New York back in the 60s and the 70s. The gang the gang culture of the 60s and the 70s literally transformed into what we now call, you know, the culture that was around the way, now it's around the world, and that's hip hop. You know, gang, you know, the whole hip hop culture grew directly out of the gang culture. You know, from Black Spades to Zulu Kings to Almighty Zulu Nation. That's what it was, and you know, and the whole Spades thing came out of a cross between Black Panthers and the Stones, Black Pete Stones, right? So and then with the commercialization, you know, of that culture, the hip hop culture of which the music is just one part of, with the commercialization of that, it left a gap in the community. It left a gap in, you know, of power in the community. And so what happens when people feel powerless? When people feel powerless, they tend to, they look for power. People want power. Especially those of us, you know, you're in the hood, you know, in New York City, you got 8 million plus people. Who's gonna notice you? Who notices you? You want to do something to be noticed. You want to do something to say, hey, I'm here, you know? So what happens in '93? You see what I'm saying? You got a young brother who's putting in work because the Latinos in the jail system in Rikers were organized. When I say organized, you get there, oh, you're Latino? Okay, we got you.
Right.
We got you. Don't go over those guys. We got you. You see? So that whole thing was a response to, as we all know in the history, the Latin gangs, you know, banging on our people. So it was a response for protection. Right. And what did people see? They saw, wait a minute, that's organization, that's power. I want in. And it spread like wildfire. What do I have to do? I don't care what I gotta do. The ends justifies the means. I get power that way. And so that's kind of how that happened. You know, on the West Coast, the whole blood thing was it started as neighborhoods. Right. See, on the East Coast, it started as a prison gang. And so that, you know, that was a big disconnect, which caused issues later on between the West Coast and the East Coast. But that's another story. You know? Yeah. But, you know, the main thing is that people follow power. And even to this day, it's like, you know, you say gangs, and then you can tell our youth, look, this is what, you know, when legislation is put on the books to criminalize behavior and say, now we redefine what a gang is. It could be a group of anywhere from 3 to 50 people or better.
They switched it to 2 now.
2 now. Thank you. Yeah. Are you serious? You see, but yeah, that's called criminalizing behavior. That's what it is. And that's what we have now. But you could say that, say, wait a minute, you hustling cracks, they're hustling people. And still, they're thinking, but you know what? I can beat it. Because I need that power. I need to feel like I'm somebody. So I can beat it. You know?
From 1978 to 85, I lived on the West Coast. I lived in San Diego, California. And the neighborhood I lived in was Piru. You know, and what he's talking about is that the neighborhood, meaning that your mother was Piru, your father was Piru, and your cousin, your uncle. So my first encounter with the Bloods was in California. Now, being that I was from the East Coast, I wasn't familiar with it. I didn't get involved with it. I mean, but I was attracted to their lifestyle. And the lifestyle was basically family oriented. You know what I mean? A lot of times that would attract, tied up to what he's talking about, what attracted the young was the family, the bond, that they was disassociated from their mother or their father, or didn't have a father, period. And so when the parents don't listen to the children, right, then the children listen to each other. So your homie, your man, you know what I mean, become the one that you listen to for advice opposed to your father, who's probably not there, and probably only listen to your mother, you see what I'm saying, because she's yelling at you probably. She's not really listening to, you know, what you're going through in school. So, you know, the attractive power to that was the family, you know what I mean, and the protection, to feel the sense that, you know, you got my back. You know what I mean, regardless if I'm right or wrong. You know what I mean, you're gonna ride with me. So, you know, when I lived out there, it was a culture shock. I mean, to show you how it trickled down from the family. And so your big brother was a pyro, so then the little brother eventually, you know, became the same way. And it was a lifestyle. Just like, you know, when Sharif mentioned about the gangs within the East Coast. You know what I mean? Even up here, you know, you had G-Boys, you know what I mean? You had Black Mob, you had Tremont Boys over here, you know what I mean? Flint Street, you know what I mean? Avenue, you know, all over. So, and the attractive power then, like I said, was the youth being able to come together, you know, as youth and really kind of do what you want to do that you wasn't doing around the elder people. You know?
Just a couple of real interesting things that have been said. Our brother is talking about we're not going to stop it. If we got just plain common sense, we know that we're not. So he asked a critical question. Yeah. Now, what do we do to turn this into a productive force in our community? That's a very, very important question. And so, not to just stroke you, Brother Reborn, but it's important. That's why this is so important, why we need to do this. And we do got, it's on a very low level, but we do have the elders and the youth talking to each other, even in this room. And that's my point. We're not going to turn it into a productive force if we don't even talk to one another. That's gotta happen. That's a must. And so that's real important. And then brother hit on what I think is the most critical reason why our youth are attracted to gangs. Lack of love. And they find love there, they find family there, you know, and so, I mean, that's really it. And so we have to make these connections, because remember we started out talking about the breakdown of family. One part of the breakdown of family is children and their own parents stop communicating. So we need to be just real clear about when we make these phrases, what we're talking about.
Our community does not engage in mental health services, and we have intergenerational trauma. And when you don't deal with those pieces, you have unhealthy individuals running around the community. That's the first piece. When you look back to the home now, and you have people with traumatic histories raising children, not realizing that their parenting skills are being affected by their traumas, you have a recipe for further generations of further traumas to occur. Right? So now you got a whole bunch of people who can't communicate with one another, and nobody will go get help.
Smart like Malcolm, only truths in the circle. Squares unwelcome, it's a comrade kinship. Family friendship, when it's on, niggas swarming an instant on instinct. Coordinated and sync with each other, same color, chain link with your brother like in the hull of the slave ship. I let my bandana drip for the blood in my vein. For every crip, we all one and the same. The daily struggle is the common bond we have.